Now, the current Albanese government says that the previous government, the coalition government, had neglected ties with Indonesia. You've just come back from Indonesia. Is that the perception?
Well, there is a perception, I think, widely shared in Indonesia that the government of Morrison, and in fact, several of his predecessor governments have been more inclined to prioritize relationships with Western allies, and therefore the relationship with Indonesia has been less prioritized. And I think that there is some anticipation that there would be a slight shift, at least within the new Labour government, where the Indonesian relationship will get greater priority.
Now, there are strong trade ties, of course. You know, the figures that came out earlier this week showed that both countries are actually enjoying economic progress and success with these ties. But what about political, social ties? How does Indonesia view these bilateral ties? How much value does Jakarta place on what's happening in Canberra?
Well, I mean, I think you should always distinguish between what happens in high politics and what happens in the people-to-people relationship. They don't always coincide. At the level of high politics, there's always been highs and lows, and we're actually, I think, in a situation where the circumstances are pretty good. There haven't been many major crises at all in the relationship between the two countries. But in terms of the people-to-people relationship, they've always been quite good. I mean, Australians come to Indonesia, Indonesians come for education purposes in Australia, and there are ties that develop at the people-to-people level on the basis of those kinds of relationships. And they've not always been deterred by the fluctuations at the high level of politics.
Just sticking with the high levels of politics, we do know that there was some tension between the two countries after the AUKUS submarine deal was signed. Talk to us about how that was playing out in Indonesia. How was that received?
Well, I think at best I could say that it was very cautiously received. I think that some elements within the Indonesian government tried to play down the concerns of the Indonesian policy-making circles, most prominently the defense minister. But generally speaking, I think within policy-making circles in Indonesia, there was concern that AUKUS would drag the region into superpower politics that might endanger the security of the region by simply the fact that all of these powers, or many of the powers, involved broadly in the sorts of conflicts that are the background for AUKUS, are nuclear powers, and that's something that makes Indonesian policymakers quite jittery.
Australia also very concerned about the growing economic and political influence of China in the region. Where does Indonesia stand, in regards to Beijing's reach across Southeast Asia?
Yeah, well, that's very interesting because there is a high degree of ambivalence in Indonesia still, actually, and some of the negative, shall we say, sentiments towards China go back all the way to the sort of history of the Cold War period, but also because of Chinese apparent ambitions in the South China Sea. Nevertheless, the economic ties between the two countries have actually strengthened over the last few years of the Jokowi government, simply because the Chinese have been willing to invest in many of the expensive signature infrastructure projects of the Jokowi government in a way that Western investors might be less inclined to do so.
Professor Vedi Hadis, it is fantastic getting your insight here on Weekend Breakfast. Thank you so much for sharing your views.